I've played Cataclysm Classic for 100 hours. Is it as bad as everyone says? Well, let's find out. Let me know, guys, if it's too loud.
So apparently, according to the classic WoW community, Cataclysm is the worst expansion in the existence of World of Warcraft, and if you play it, you'll go bald and you
It's not necessarily the worst expansion. I think people consider it its worst because the destruction of the world, and they destroyed the old Barrens, the old world as it used to be. But in terms of some mechanics, Cataclysm wasn't that bad.
fall off. But how much of that is really true? And how much of it is just the classic Andy mindset? You know, the kind of person who would prefer to play a class that has a one-button rotation, and there's only like 2 or 3 viable DPS options. Well, over the past few weeks, I've really stuck my teeth into Cataclysm Classic. There's definitely some things I love, and other things that I absolutely despise. So grab a beer and let's get into it. We're going to cover these topics: endgame content, leveling content, character progression, class design, and lastly, some final thoughts. Now, fortunately, during my Cataclysm journey, I have had a pretty hectic IRL life with some pretty storylines.
Whoa.
So suffice to say, let's try that one again. So suffice to say, I've had to approach the game as a casual Andy, unable to commit to a raid schedule.
Wow.
But despite that, and despite not being in the guild, I've been able to complete the majority of the endgame content, proving that Cata Classic is definitely very casual friendly. I've easily gotten myself into organised pub groups on Discord on the days that best suited me. And by the end of week 2, I was actually able to acquire an average item level of 350, although it probably would be way higher than that if I wasn't still running around with a normal dungeon weapon. Yes, I'm not making that up. By the way guys, if you're still leveling up your character at Alton Season of Discovery, Cataclysm or Era, be sure to check out the Rustic Spear add-on, the fastest leveling add-on that you can get, created by world record holding speed levelers.
It's actually a good add-on, boys.
Description. Raids on normal mode are very approachable. I don't think I've wiped more than once on a boss, even in very questionable pub groups on the LFG chat where you seriously question whether the group is going to give you any more grey hairs. The only boss that is difficult to pug is Nefarium, which makes sense. You do need a lot of genuine coordination between the tank and an assistant to help kite those adds, and the fight is a big DPS check. But this is fine, it's the final boss of the phase, it shouldn't be an easy guaranteed kill and only a small challenge. Heroic mode, however, is not as approachable. You do not get guaranteed kills on heroic mode yet. You don't see many pugs attempting more than a couple of bosses on heroic mode. Still, only 160 guilds have completed all the content on heroic as I'm recording this video.
And it's gonna be like that for a while. I don't think we'll see a nerf soon to heroics in Cata. It's gonna be like this for a while. But no big deal. Next phase will come.
Hardest boss here, it actually looks like Bastion of Twilight is giving groups more of a challenge than the Blackwing Descent bosses. I think the difficulty level of Cataclysm raids is finally where we get the perfect balance of casual friendly content and difficult content for the more hardcore players. Casual players are able to enjoy the endgame content playing on normal difficulty.
The amount of fire on every boss on the ground.
Through heroic when they get better gear from normal mode. And the hardcore players are able to enjoy more difficult content straight away. Whereas in the past, especially in vanilla...
It's so weird that I haven't done those things yet. I've done them in the past. My mage is 85. Should I play Cata, man? Should I go back and try it? Let me know, guys, in the comments if you enjoy Cata. Let me know if it's fun. Oh, boy.
And TBC, we had raid tiers that were too easy for hardcore players, like Naxxramas and Wrath of the Lich King, or tiers too difficult for casual players like Sunwell in TBC. The normal and heroic difficulty divide creates a balance to please the varying skill levels of MMO players. And the raids themselves are top tier content, particularly on heroic mode, when the mechanics become a little bit more technical. It feels very satisfying to finally get a boss kill that you've been working on for a couple of hours. The variety of raid options also feels much better than just having to stay in the same raid for weeks on end. The TBC launch also did this, whereas in Wrath, we had to sit in a raid that we'd already done. Each raid is a very unique vibe and environment, and the best part about them is how they convey a
You're right, man. About Wrath of the Lich King, I felt weird about the phase with Naxxramas. We are doing Kill to Zad and stuff. It was fun for a month, but then it was like, oh shit, I've done this in Classic like for ages. Now we're doing this again. And it wasn't even more different. Actually, Naxxramas was easier in Wrath than it used to be in Classic. I remember in Classic we had to get past Saphiron. We had to come really prepared with frost resistance, with frost protection potions, world buffs. Without world buffs, at least the first month and a half, we weren't able to kill Saphiron because it was like a DPS check as well as a good raid coordination. But yeah.
Flash of vanilla nostalgia, especially in Blackwing Descent. This generally feels like a continuous raid from Blackwing Lair. The entrance to the raid is even inside the...
They call it nostalgia. I call it copy-paste content. So which new raids we're making now? Well, let's reuse some of the old ones. And I think it started with Wrath of the Lich King with Naxxramas. If it worked in Wrath of the Lich King, why wouldn't it work in Cataclysm? Cataclysm seems sloppy and lazy, and I think the reason why it's sloppy and lazy, it's because the developers focused so much in redesigning the entire world, destroying the world, making things like the Deathwing event, making all the quests all over reworked in all the zones. So they didn't actually have time to make real content for Cataclysm. So they went like, yeah, just take Blackwing Lair, take Molten Core, just remake them, mix them, put them there, give them a raid. It's not even that much. Well, let's be honest, it's different. But yeah, it feels like Cata was rushed. Although they had a lot of developers.
The original Nefarian boss room. You really can't fault the endgame content in Cataclysm. It's only an improved and more refined version of Wrath raiding. It's a shame so many classic players have been too stubborn to try it out, because it will probably be one of the best phases of this expansion. So if you look at the script, when I originally wrote it...
Man, I heard that quite often. I was like in a podcast with Scotty J and other people, Saddle, and they said that the phase 1 is the best in Cataclysm. Is it though? Really? Blackwing Descent and so on, like... Okay then.
All the spelling mistakes, ignore that. I mean, I don't proofread my scripts, obviously. No one ever sees them until today. Anyway, when I originally wrote the script, I was commenting on how the population numbers aren't that great. But when I had another look today, to be honest, they're much better than I thought. I've always predicted that Cata Classic will get off-peak TBC Classic numbers, and it's actually in the mid-range of TBC Classic off-peak numbers. 300k have been logged on Warcraft logs. Comparatively, SOD only got 50k right now, but peaked an average of 400k, and Wrath got an average peak number in the ballpark of 500k. So the numbers are actually way better than I thought they were going to be, and before people start dooming those numbers, Classic Cataclysm alone still has a higher population than most other competitor MMOs. But there is a serious problem with Cata raiding. The content itself is perfect, but the way that raid lockouts work doesn't do it any favours. So in Wrath we had 10 mans, with a separate lockout to 25 mans, but in Cata Classic, 10 man mode, 25 man mode, heroic and normal all have the same lockout, with the exception of Barradin's Hold. Not that I ever get into Barradin's Hold to check that because I'm a Death Knight. I don't understand why they've done this, because they've essentially created less content for no real reason. 10 and 25 man at the very least should be a separate lockout, so there's natural incentive to do 25 man raiding.
Yeah, true. I mean, you don't have to clear them all every week, but it's nice to have the option. I was never a big fan of 10-man raids, to be honest. But I was never a big fan of heroic versions also, so... Yeah, I'm more like a classic type of guy where you go into a dungeon, you do it weekly, you get your loot, and then go back to playing the game.
The second chance to get the loot again will keep 25-man raid content relevant, which I know a lot of players definitely want. 25-man feels like a proper raid, 10-man doesn't really. The only advantage of this system is that it's way more casual friendly. With less bosses to kill and get loot from, the easier it is for casual players to keep up with the more hardcore players. But in the later phases, if they're going to add gamma dungeons, then keeping up won't be a problem anyway for players. I just think giving players less stuff to do, in the long run, in my humble opinion, it's risky business. I've always thought that Classic WoW was such a wasted opportunity for Blizzard because they haven't bothered to add any more new raid content, and it's why the game will always have a seasonal population. It's never really going to properly grow. Now, leveling is very different at Cata Classic. It's a totally different style to Vanilla, and I understand why people don't like it. Vanilla, it's all about the adventure and the journey of exploring a new world, whereas Cata Classic is much more fast-paced and linear. In Vanilla, there were long quest lines. Sometimes they sprawled across multiple zones, where in Cata, each zone has a quest line that guides you to every single quest hub in the area. Honestly, questing has adopted this style since TVC. With every expansion it's become even more linear, and on retail it's on a totally different level where you just follow one storyline. The advantage of this is that the questing process can focus more on storytelling and the lore of the zone that you're in and communicating that to the player, but you feel like the developers are holding your hand.
Why would they focus on making the questing better when they have boost? Yeah, the linear part of the questing, yeah, Fever started in TBC, I guess. Questing after Vanilla was different. Leveling in Vanilla was hard. There weren't even enough quests. You would go from left to right, from right to left. I think it was better in Vanilla. I did level multiple characters in Wrath of the Lich King and TBC. I don't say it's that bad, but it's just like a path you need to focus on, and you can't really deviate from it. It's a bit. I leveled recently a character, a druid, all the way to 60 something in Cata. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't something that I would like to do a second time either.
And many MMO players simply don't like that style of questing or really care about a game story anyway. There is just something about that old vanilla world that is sometimes hard to describe and justify. Yeah, it's a long grind and there's usually a lot of walking involved when trying to complete a quest, but there's something satisfying about it. Another quality of vanilla quest design is the difficulty, particularly when it comes to group quests. For most classes, taking on 3 enemies is a death sentence, encouraging players to group up and make friends in order to progress. But in Cata, when you're decked out in looms, honestly, mobs just drop within a couple of globals, and you barely ever lose any mana. The sense of danger from the open world is non-existent, and you feel like a god when you hit level 10, before you've even got to the endgame. And it's a shame because they definitely improved the quest from...
There's no real challenge. As we speak, we're leveling a rogue on a Deviate Delight. And I've died with this rogue multiple times, and now I'm struggling. I went to buy some upgrades from the auction house, because I think I died in the starting zone. I died in Silverfin Forest, and now I'm going to go to the Barrens and probably I'm going to die again. I don't have like gear. It's a fresh character, and it makes the journey a bit more interesting, so to say. You died a few times at level 10. Yeah, it's mostly because I'm rusty, but I'm used with the brain-dead leveling from SOD and from Cataclysm.
Being simple, pick this item up, kill this mob, to more creative ideas. But the core values of what made a vanilla leveling journey aren't there anymore. It's still a fun journey, but it's fun in a different way for different reasons. But the thing is, most people playing Cata Classic don't care about the vanilla vibes anyway. They just want good quality endgame content, so the leveling should be a short, sweet and simple process. Majority of players won't even go into the open world and just queue Dungeon Finder instead anyway. I mean, I just logged into my alt at Razor Hill and I only saw one person AFK at the Flight Master. In vanilla, no matter what phase you're in, there's always a few people at every single quest hub. But to be fair, at least Razor Hill does now have some class trainers. That is a godsend. The Dungeon Finder was the ultimate open world killer. It's why I've never been a huge fan of it. But I'm going to keep my opinions about Dungeon Finder to myself before I get put on a stake. I've always thought that once you...
The thing with Dungeon Finders is like... Without Dungeon Finder, I don't know, lately people got so lazy in MMOs. They don't want to travel anywhere. They want to get summoned everywhere. Like in Season of Discovery, there were warlocks that were making a fortune just by summoning people everywhere. People didn't want to fucking travel. They were like, I don't care anymore. I just want to get summoned. How much? 10 gold? Take it. Take it. I'm just gonna swipe $50. I'm gonna buy 1,000 gold and I'm just gonna get summoned left and right and everywhere. What happened to people? Why we become so lazy?
Complete the dungeon finder, it should give you a double XP buff for an hour or two, but only for open world leveling. That way the open world at least somewhat stays alive. Ironically, the reason why they added cross-server open world to the game was to resurrect the open world, but even that didn't work because it's so much easier to just chill in Orgrimmar or Stormwind and keep a dungeon finder. Now, character progression is very important in an RPG, MMO or not, and developers have to make it interesting, satisfying, but not boring. In Cataclysm, there's a number of ways to progress your character. Talents, gear, gems, enchants, reputation enchants, and profession bonuses. And the new progression system is reforging. Overall, your progression doesn't feel too grindy. The most grindy element is leveling your professions, which can sometimes be done very inexpensively, if not for free if you do it smartly. I'll actually have a video about that coming very soon. Reforging is a system where you can customize the stats on your gear. Most of the time, you are just reforging the stats into your best stats, but it makes that hit cap much easier and stress-free to obtain. You will very likely not have to turn up to your raid with multiple different gear options in your bags for different group setups. You can quickly just go and get a reforge. I also like it because if, for instance, I want to go solo some raids, I'll just go and reforge full into mastery and respec into blood to make it much easier. People who dual spec healer and DPS can usually just do a quick reforge to make themselves competent in a raid. They won't have to go out there and farm an entire new offset. Obviously farming an offset will be better, but if you need it quickly for the guild raid, then bosh, you can just go and reforge and you're sorted. After trying a few classes in Cataclysm, it's obvious that Blizzard were trying their hardest to make every class feel exciting to play with their big cooldowns, rotations, and fun abilities. Everyone criticises the talent system for being stripped down, but it doesn't really feel that way because of all the extra glyphs they added, and so many classes got reworked to have new and interesting systems, like Paladin, Priest, Warlock, Hunter, Druid having their resources revamped with things like Holy Power, Shadow Orbs, and a balanced Druid Eclipse bar. Classes have much more nuance, a little technicality in order for you to master them. And I've personally always found this to be a little bit more engaging than spamming the same button over and over again like we did in Vanilla and TBC. But I do understand that some people do prefer simplicity. But at the end of the day, I don't think Cataclysm Classics are that dramatically overcomplicated to the point where we couldn't call them simple. Yeah, some are more harder than others, but there's definitely quite a big part of them which are just very easy to pick up and get going. Realistically, Cata Classic isn't classic anymore, but there's nothing wrong with that.
True.
At the end of the day, it's Wrath of the Lich King with dragons.
Cata is not classic anymore, and neither it's Seasonal Discovery. I think the idea of classic WoW got diluted so much until we don't have classic anymore, boys. Season of Discovery used to be classic. It's obviously not. And Cata, I don't even know where to put it. It is a classic Cataclysm server. But Cata is not classic. When we talk about the idea of classic, we think about Vanilla WoW, maybe TBC.
If you enjoyed raiding in Wrath, then the Cata raiding
or
experience
at least the style, the slow-paced style. Cookie cutter specs, rock, paper, scissors classes. Warriors being overpowered and rogues or stuff like that.
Isn't going to be that much different. You'll probably enjoy it. But it's important to understand that it's a different game now. Honestly, it's kind of futile to criticise Cataclysm on what it isn't. It's more productive to criticise it on what it is. Fortunately, it seems like Blizzard want to provide a continuing old-school MMO product to keep the classic Andes happy. They just kind of f***ed that one up with Season of Discovery. We'll talk about that in my next video, but it was an experiment, and at least Blizzard are doing something. At heart, Cataclysm is a fast-paced, theme park MMO heavily focused on challenging endgame group content, and it certainly delivers that alongside great high fantasy vibes and lore.
Do you think the Blizzard guy was right when he said you think you do but you don't? No, he wasn't right. The reason why I think he wasn't right is because we already had Classic. and Classic was probably the most successful MMO launch for years now. I mean, Classic broke new records on Twitch when it was launched, over 1 million viewers and stuff like that. Classic lasted all the way until the end. Towards the last patch, Naxxrama's patch, they were accused of 10,000 people still, with all the servers being populated. Classic WoW was a total success. TBC was okay. Wrath of the Lich King, especially early on, was relatively okay. The numbers were big, people were playing. I do believe that Classic overall was a success. People think about the low pace style, min-maxing everything and using rested XP. Yeah, I know. I mean, leveling is not everything in Classic, right? Just because you want to be efficient with something. I don't know. Like, whatever I think it was Classic, listen, I think Classic was the first 2 phases of Season of Discovery. And although there were like leveling guides and rested XP and stuff like that, it still felt nice to play. Probably some of you experienced it. There was some sort of classy feel to it. There wasn't something dictated that you need to do. There wasn't a specific path that you need to follow. People were doing like everything they ever wanted. I was farming Humbert's Helm and I was grinding like dungeons and so on, and I was chasing gold. Once phase 3 came, they gave you like a specific path to follow. They were like, this is the best thing to do, this is you should do it. Do Nightmare Incursions. Spam questing, which is dead. It's boring content, let's be honest. It wasn't Classic anymore in phase 3. Although some elements of phase 3 were nice, specifically... Okay, let's get back to the Cata video, boys, because we're drifting away.
Law. But the raid lockout system seriously needs some work. I hope Blizzard actually do change something about it, but it's probably very unlikely. I fundamentally don't understand why Blizzard decided to release Cata with an inferior lockout system, but they later scrapped and reworked. Raid lockouts in Cata are worse than previous expansions and the following expansions. They have needlessly created less content. Fair enough, Cata does feel a little bit like playing retail, but at least the center community on your server is still an actual thing. On retail, you can use a raid finder and premium group finder to complete all of the content, and it's all cross-server. There's no real point in servers anymore on retail. But in Cata, you still need to group up with people on your server in order to complete the content. There's a larger incentive to get to know people and join a guild, and there's still a level of player and guild reputation on your server. That social MMO element isn't totally lost yet. For some Classic fans, it's simply not going to be their cup of tea, and that's fine. It's not an old school MMO anymore, it doesn't have that kind of vibe. This is very obvious when you look at the recent fresh vanilla server movement. These people don't even want to play Season of Discovery, they just want to play vanilla yet again, exactly how it was. Which is interesting. I'll be covering that in another video very soon. I believe nothing speaks more volumes about how stale the MMO market is right now than so many people wanting to go back and play a 20-year-old version of World of Warcraft yet again. And that's not a diss on those players, because I'm going to be making a character soon. That's just a diss on MMO developers. But until that adventure begins, my name is MetaGoblin, and to my next video...
Ciao! Thank you very much, MetaGoblin. Let's leave a like. I played Cataclysm for 100 hours. Is it as bad as everyone said? I'm not sure if he answered the question. He did, in his own way. I haven't played for 100. I played for like maybe 30 hours, give or take. Need to reach 100. That means I have to do all the farms, all the grinds, all the pre-bists and stuff like that. I haven't done so far. Let me give you a link from the channel. Probably know him from YouTube. And let me know in the comments, how do you feel about Cataclysm? And also stop by at twitch.tv/Frostadamus, where we watch those things live. Thank you. Bye-bye.